Sarah Chen's fingers hovered over her keyboard, the cursor blinking accusingly at her half-finished patient notes. Another quiet night at Bear Creek Veterinary Clinic, interrupted only by the gentle snoring of recovering patients in their kennels. The Montana wilderness pressed against the windows, dark and vast, filled with its usual symphony of cricket songs and rustling pines. She reached for her coffee, now cold and bitter, when the first tremor rattled her desk. The metal examination table skittered across the floor, instruments dancing in their trays. Sarah bolted to her feet, coffee forgotten, as a high-pitched whine cut through the night air. The dogs in recovery began to howl. Through the clinic's front windows, she watched a strange light split the sky. It wasn't the steady arc of a meteor or the blinking pattern of aircraft. This light pulsed, writhed, and changed colors like oil on water. The object zigzagged across the stars, leaving trails of prismatic light in its wake, moving like nothing she'd ever seen in her 15 years of stargazing from this remote outpost. What the hell? Sarah pressed her face against the glass, tracking the object's erratic descent. It dropped below the tree line, then shot up again, as if fighting against gravity itself. The light grew brighter, more frantic in its movements, before finally plunging toward her property's pond. The impact was oddly quiet. No explosion, no earth-shaking boom. Just a soft whump, followed by a geyser of water that caught the moonlight like scattered diamonds. Steam rose from the pond in coiling tendrils, carrying an odd scent, like ozone and something sweeter, almost like jasmine. The water began to glow from beneath, soft blues and greens that shouldn't exist in nature. Sarah grabbed her emergency med kit and flashlight out of pure instinct, her mind already racing through possibilities. A downed aircraft. Some classified military project. The autumn air bit through her thin scrubs as she jogged down the gravel path to the pond. Her flashlight beam caught something breaking the water surface, a translucent shape about the size of a car door, its edges curved and smooth like blown glass. The object pulsed with its own inner light, sending ripples of color through the dark water. As she drew closer, movement caught her eye. Something was inside the crystalline structure, pressing against its surface. Something alive. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. Years of treating injured wildlife had taught her to approach unknown situations with caution, but something about this felt different. The creature inside the structure moved again, and this time she caught a glimpse of iridescent scales that shifted colors like a living aurora borealis. "Hey there," she called out softly, using the same gentle tone she used with injured animals. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The being inside the structure responded to her voice. It pressed what looked like a limb against the transparent surface, leaving trails of bioluminescence in its wake. The entire pod began to hum at a frequency that made Sarah's teeth ache and her skin prickle with goosebumps. She took another step closer, water now soaking through her shoes. The humming intensified, and cracks appeared in the crystalline surface, spreading like spider webs. Sarah had a split second to make a decision: back away to safety, or move closer to help whatever was trapped inside. The answer came as naturally as breathing. She was a healer. It didn't matter if the patient had fur, scales, or apparently, the ability to glow like the northern lights. Something was hurt and needed help. Sarah waded deeper into the pond, arms outstretched. The crystal pod shattered just as she reached it, dissolving into the water like sugar in hot tea. The creature fell into her waiting arms, its body surprisingly warm and light, tendrils of something like silk wrapping instinctively around her wrists. In that moment, as the alien being trembled against her chest, Sarah felt something brush against her mind. A wave of relief, gratitude, and desperate need that brought tears to her eyes. The universe, it seemed, had just dropped something extraordinary into her lap. And Sarah Chen, rural veterinarian and self-proclaimed hermit, was about to have her life changed forever. The creature in Sarah's arms was dying. She could feel it in the way its tremors weakened, see it in the dulling of its once brilliant scales. What had been a living kaleidoscope of colors was fading to a sickly pale blue, like a tropical fish left too long in cold water. "Stay with me," she whispered, sloshing through the pond toward the clinic. The alien's tendrils remained wrapped around her wrists, but their grip was weakening. Each step sent ripples through the water, disturbing the last dissolving fragments of the crystal pod that now glowed like dying stars. The creature's body was impossibly light, as if hollow inside, and about the size of a young sea lion. Its skin felt like silk over glass, transparent enough that she could see pulses of bioluminescence moving through what must be its circulatory system. What caught her attention most were its eyes. 3 pairs arranged in a gentle arc across what she assumed was its face, each pair a different size and shade of violet. All 6 eyes fixed on her as she carried it into the clinic's emergency room. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed to cause it pain, its scales contracting and darkening. Sarah hit the dimmer switch with her elbow, plunging the room into a more gentle twilight. "Okay," she breathed, laying the creature on the examination table. "Let's figure this out." The alien released her wrists, leaving behind faint glowing spirals on her skin that slowly faded. It tried to move but seemed too weak, its body trembling with the effort. A sound emerged from somewhere within it, like wind chimes in a storm, musical but distressed. Sarah's mind raced through her medical training, trying to find any parallel that might help. The creature was obviously struggling to breathe, its body expanding and contracting too rapidly. The air. Could Earth's atmosphere be toxic to it? The pod it arrived in must have provided a different environment. "Hold on," she told it, rushing to grab the oxygen therapy chamber she used for critical care patients. It was their best chance. She quickly modified the settings, hoping that whatever was wrong, and controlled environment might help stabilize the creature. As she reached for the alien to move it into the chamber, it pressed a tendril against her temple. The world exploded into images and sensations that weren't her own. A vast ship made of the same crystalline material as the pod, sailing through stars. A violent storm of swirling purple energy, tearing the small pod away. The terror of falling forever through the void. The pod's environmental systems failing during entry into Earth's atmosphere. The desperate need for something. A gas or element she couldn't quite understand, but the alien's body needed it desperately. "I want to help you," Sarah said, pressing her hand against the tendril, hoping her intent would carry through whatever this connection was. "Please, let me try." The alien's largest pair of eyes blinked in sequence. More images flooded Sarah's mind. The crystalline pod filling with a swirling purple mist, the alien breathing it deeply. Some kind of atmospheric requirement. The color reminded her of the storm that had torn the pod away from its ship. Sarah sprinted to her supply room, grabbing tanks of different medical gases. One by one, she introduced small amounts into the oxygen chamber. Nitrogen, carbon dioxide, argon. The alien's colors continued to fade until she tried xenon. At the first wisp of the noble gas, the creature's scales flickered with renewed light. "That's it." Sarah quickly adjusted the chamber's mixture, keeping oxygen minimal and xenon higher. The alien's colors strengthened, its breathing slowed, and the distressed chiming sounds softened into a gentle hum that made the metal instruments in the room vibrate sympathetically. Through their lingering mental connection, Sarah felt the creature's relief wash over her like a warm wave. But underneath that relief was something more complex: confusion, curiosity, and wonder at finding help in a place its people had always feared. Sarah pulled up a stool next to the chamber, watching the play of colors across the alien's scales. "You're safe now," she said softly, placing her hand against the clear wall. The alien moved one of its tendrils to mirror her gesture from the other side. "Whatever happens next, we'll figure it out together." The next 12 hours tested everything Sarah knew about emergency medicine. The xenon mixture had stabilized her alien patient, but its condition remained precarious. Every time she thought they'd reached equilibrium, new complications arose. The creature's bioluminescence would surge and fade like a stuttering heartbeat, each dim cycle sending Sarah's own heart racing with fear. She'd moved her entire workstation next to the chamber, laptop balanced on her knees as she researched Xenon's properties and effects. Coffee cups multiplied around her feet while she monitored the alien's vital signs, or what she assumed were vital signs. The regular pulses of light through its crystalline circulatory system had to mean something. "Your internal pressure's dropping again," she murmured, adjusting the chamber settings. The alien's largest pair of eyes tracked her movements, all pupil now, dark against its fading scales. "Don't you dare give up on me." The creature pressed a tendril against the chamber wall, leaving a faint glowing print that slowly faded. Sarah had started thinking of these marks as its signature, unique patterns that changed with its mood. This one was weaker than the others, barely visible even in the dim light. Another tendril reached out, requesting contact. Sarah had learned this gesture over the past hours. The alien needed to share something. She pressed her hand against the chamber wall, and the now familiar sensation of foreign thoughts brushed against her mind. Images flowed between them, the alien's memories of its people, tall crystalline beings moving through great halls filled with purple mist. Sarah saw herself through the creature's eyes, a solid, warm presence in a world that felt too heavy, too dense. She felt its gratitude, its fear, and something deeper, shame. Shame. Why would you? Sarah's question trailed off as new images filled her mind. The aliens' people, the Lumini, teaching their young about humans. In their lessons, humans were dangerous, unpredictable creatures who destroyed everything they touched. The alien felt ashamed for trusting her, for going against everything its people believed. "Hey, no." Sarah pressed both hands against the chamber now. "You did the right thing. Look at me." All 6 eyes focused on her face. Sarah concentrated, trying for the first time to send her own thoughts back through their connection. She pictured herself as she was, a healer, someone who had dedicated her life to helping others. She showed the alien memories of treating injured wolves, rehabilitating hurt eagles, sitting up nights with sick horses. The alien's scales flickered with new colors, soft golds and greens she hadn't seen before. Its shame faded, replaced by curiosity and something like wonder. Suddenly, the creature convulsed. Its body arched in the chamber, scales flashing warning reds and yellows. The xenon mixture wasn't enough anymore. Something else was wrong. No. Sarah frantically checked the readings. The alien's internal pressure was plummeting, its temperature rising. Through their mental link, she felt waves of pain that brought tears to her eyes. In desperation, she did something that went against all her medical training. She opened the chamber. The alien needed more than technology. It needed connection. Sarah reached in and gently lifted the creature into her arms, cradling it against her chest like she had at the pond. Its tendrils weakly wrapped around her wrists, and their mental connection blazed to full strength. The alien's pain flooded her mind, but Sarah didn't pull away. Instead, she sent back every soothing thought she could muster. She shared memories of sunrise over the mountains, the gentle sound of rain on leaves, the warm weight of a sleeping cat in her lap. Simple moments of peace and comfort that transcended species. Gradually, the creature's tremors subsided. Its scales shifted from warning reds to softer purples and blues. The pain in their shared mental space ebbed, replaced by exhausted relief. "That's it," Sarah whispered, carefully returning the alien to the chamber. Sometimes healing needs more than medicine. Sometimes it needs trust. As she sealed the chamber and restored the xenon mixture, the alien pressed a tendril against the wall. The pattern it left was stronger now, more complex. Sarah didn't need their mental link to understand its meaning. "Thank you for proving my people wrong." Dawn painted the clinic walls in soft oranges and pinks when Sarah finally saw the first real sign of improvement. The alien scales had settled into a steady rhythm of color changes, like waves lapping at a bioluminescent shore. Its breathing had stabilized, and the xenon mixture now seemed to be properly sustaining its life functions. She'd been awake for 36 hours straight, running on coffee and determination. Her hand shook as she recorded the latest readings, but she couldn't bring herself to rest. Not when there was still so much to learn. The alien. She'd started thinking of it as Aurora after the way its scales resembled the northern lights, tapped gently against the chamber wall. Their now familiar mental connection bloomed as she pressed her palm to meet its tendril. "Ready to tell me more about your world?" Sarah asked. Aurora's response came in a cascade of images and sensations. She saw vast cities grown from living crystal, structures that reached into violet skies and sang in harmonic resonance with stellar winds. The Lumini moved through these cities like light through prisms, their bodies changing colors to communicate complex ideas and emotions. In their world, thought and feeling were one, shared freely through touch and color. But there was loneliness in these memories. Aurora had been different from birth, its colors too bright, its emotions too strong. Where other Lumini maintained careful control over their chromatic language, Aurora's scales would flash with every passing feeling. A trait considered primitive, dangerous, too much like the humans they studied from afar. "You were an outcast," Sarah murmured, understanding flowing between them. "Like me." She shared her own memories. Growing up preferring animals to people, moving to this remote clinic where the nearest neighbor was miles away, choosing solitude because it felt safer than trying to fit into a world that never quite made sense. Aurora's scales rippled with sympathetic patterns. A new image formed in their shared mental space. Sarah seen through Lumini eyes, her solid form glowing with emotional energy they'd never believed humans could possess. In their studies of Earth, they'd seen only humanity's surface: violence, chaos, unpredictability. They'd never looked deep enough to see the capacity for empathy, for unconditional acceptance. The mental connection deepened, and Sarah gasped as Aurora shared knowledge of its species' technology. She saw ships that surfed solar winds, powered by the same crystalline substance as the escape pod. Witnessed medical techniques that used resonant frequencies to heal at the cellular level. Understood how the Lumini had evolved to breathe xenon, their bodies naturally converting it into energy through a process that defied Earth physics. "Your people are incredible," Sarah said, watching Aurora's scales shift through proud purples and pleased blues. "But they're missing so much by staying away from us." Aurora's response was complex, a swirl of agreement tinged with worry. More images flowed. Past encounters with other species that had ended in violence, civilizations that had tried to capture and study the Lumini, to steal their technology and exploit their abilities. Fear had driven them to isolation, to watching from afar as humanity developed, waiting for signs that humans might be different. And instead of signs, they got you. Sarah smiled. A lost child who found exactly the right human to change their minds. Aurora's scales flushed with warm golds and roses. Happiness, Sarah had learned, and affection. The alien pressed all 6 tendrils against the chamber wall, creating an intricate pattern of glowing spirals. Through their connection, Sarah felt its certainty. This wasn't just chance. Something greater had guided that escape pod to her pond, to someone who would see past alien biology, to the kindred spirit beneath. As if to emphasize the point, Aurora shared one final image. The view from its ship, Earth glowing like a blue jewel in the void. But now the planet wore a new light in the alien's perception. Not a place to fear, but a world of possibility, where even the strangest hearts could find a home. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes, overwhelmed by the trust and hope flowing between them. "We'll show them," she promised. "Together, we'll show them everything they've been missing." The first helicopter appeared at sunrise on the 3rd day. Sarah had dozed off in her chair beside Aurora's chamber, their mental connection humming like a lullaby between them. The rhythmic thump of rotors dragged her awake. One glance through the window sent ice through her veins. A black military helicopter hovering low over her pond, spotlights scanning the crash site. Aurora's scales flashed crimson with alarm. Through their link, Sarah felt its terror spike as memories surfaced. Another world, another time, where curious military forces had captured one of its kind. The Lumini had barely escaped, leaving behind fragments of their crystalline technology. Fragments that had been weaponized against them. "They won't find you," Sarah whispered, dimming the clinic lights. "I promise." The helicopter's spotlight swept across the clinic windows. Sarah ducked, pulling blankets over Aurora's chamber to hide its glow. More memories pressed against her mind. Aurora's people discussing humans' military capabilities, their tendency to dissect and analyze anything they didn't understand. A vehicle's engine rumbled outside. Sarah crept to the window, peering through a gap in the blinds. Men in hazmat suits were unloading equipment from unmarked black vans. One held a device that pulsed with an unsettling blue light, sweeping it over the ground like a metal detector. "They're tracking the pod's energy signature," Sarah realized, Aurora's knowledge flowing into her mind. The dissolved crystal had left traces in the pond, breadcrumbs leading straight to them. Aurora's scales darkened with despair. Its tendrils pressed against the chamber wall, sharing urgent images. Sarah should surrender it, save herself from what was coming. The alien's fear wasn't just for itself. It was terrified of what might happen to her. "Not happening," Sarah said firmly, already moving. She grabbed her emergency medical bag and began packing it with portable oxygen tanks. "You're not just my patient anymore. You're my friend." The word friend resonated through their mental link. Aurora had no direct translation, its people's relationships defined by utility and hierarchy. But it understood the emotion behind the word, the fierce protectiveness, the unconditional acceptance. Its scales shifted to a deep, determined purple. Sarah worked quickly, modifying a portable oxygen concentrator to accept SIN and cartridges. The footsteps outside grew closer. Through Aurora's enhanced senses, she felt the vibrations of heavy boots on gravel, heard the crackle of radio communications. "Security team, east entrance," a muffled voice reported. "Energy signatures strongest near the main building." Aurora's terror spiked again, but this time it was accompanied by something else. Determination. It pressed a tendril against the chamber wall, sharing a plan. The crystalline fragments in the pond still held traces of its neural patterns. If it concentrated, it could create a false reading, a ghost signal to lead the searchers away. "It could kill you," Sarah protested, feeling the energy such an effort would require. "You're not strong enough." Aurora's response flowed through their link. Trust, determination, and a depth of gratitude that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Together, they were stronger than alone. Sarah nodded, quickly preparing a portable chamber. Outside, she heard the teams coordinating their approach. They had minutes, maybe less. Aurora closed all 6 eyes, its scales beginning to pulse with intense light. Sarah felt it gathering its strength, reaching out to the dissolved crystal fragments. The alien's body trembled with effort as it sent its neural signature racing through the pond water, creating a ghost of itself moving away from the clinic. "Contact moving southwest," a voice crackled outside. "All teams redirect." The sound of boots and vehicles began to fade. Aurora sagged in its chamber, scales dim but triumphant. Sarah moved swiftly, transferring it to the portable unit. "The mountains," she whispered, securing the xenon supply. "I have a cabin. We just have to make it there." Aurora's scales flickered weakly, understanding, trust, and something deeper. As Sarah carried it toward her truck, hidden behind the clinic, their mental link hummed with a shared certainty. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The cabin crouched in the shadow of old growth pines, its weathered walls almost invisible in the gathering dusk. Sarah had inherited it from her grandmother, but rarely visited. Now, as she carried Aurora's portable chamber through the door, it felt like sanctuary. "Power's solar," she whispered, though the helicopters had faded hours ago. "We should be safe here. No energy signatures to track." Aurora's scales rippled with exhausted blues and purples. The effort of creating the false trail had drained it severely, but their escape had worked. Sarah had taken every back road she knew, doubling back and crossing streams until she was certain they weren't followed. She set up Aurora's chamber near the cabin's small fireplace, adjusting the xenon mixture. Through their mental link, she felt the alien's discomfort ease as the gas flow stabilized. But something else troubled it. She could feel questions pressing against her mind. "What is it?" she asked, sitting cross-legged beside the chamber. "Show me." Aurora's response came in waves of thought and emotion. It shared memories of watching humans from orbit, studying their conflicts and chaos. The Lumini had seen humans fight wars, destroy ecosystems, fear anything different. Yet here was Sarah, risking everything to protect a creature she barely knew. "Ah," Sarah smiled, understanding. "You want to know why?" She pressed her palm to the chamber wall, letting her own memories flow. The lonely child who found comfort in treating injured animals. The teenager who spent summers helping at wildlife sanctuaries. The adult who chose this solitary life, not from fear of others, but from a desire to help those who couldn't help themselves. "Humans feel everything so strongly," she explained, watching Aurora's scales shift with interest. "Love, hate, fear, compassion. We contain multitudes," as one of our poets said. Sometimes those feelings drive us to do terrible things, but they also drive us to incredible acts of kindness. Aurora's response was immediate and surprising, a memory of itself as a young Lumini, being scolded for showing too much emotion, for letting its colors flare with every feeling. In Lumini society, such lack of control was seen as primitive, dangerous. They valued logic and order above all. "You're different," Sarah realized. "Like me. That's why you understand humans better than your people do. You feel things the way we do." The alien's scales flushed with recognition and relief. All its life, it had been treated as flawed, too emotional, too unpredictable. Now, through Sarah's eyes, it saw these traits as strengths. Its telepathic abilities, stronger than most Lumini due to its emotional sensitivity, had saved their lives today. Aurora pressed all 6 tendrils against the chamber wall, sharing deeper memories. Sarah gasped as she experienced the alien's first view of Earth from space, a blue marble swirling with white clouds. But where other Lumini saw only chaos and danger, Aurora had seen beauty in humanity's complexity, their capacity to contain opposing forces within themselves. "That's why you trusted me," Sarah whispered. "You saw past what your people taught you, just like I saw past what humans might fear in you." The alien's response filled their mental link with warmth. It had always been drawn to Earth, fascinated by humans' emotional depth. The spatial storm that separated it from its ship hadn't been entirely random. Aurora had subconsciously steered toward Earth, toward the possibility of finding others who felt as deeply as it did. A log shifted in the fireplace, sending sparks up the chimney. Aurora's scales reflected the firelight, creating patterns Sarah now recognized as happiness, contentment, belonging. For the first time in its life, the alien felt truly understood. Sarah leaned against the chamber, exhausted but peaceful. Outside, crickets chirped in the mountain darkness. Through their connection, she felt Aurora experiencing these simple earth sounds with wonder, finding beauty in their chaotic symphony. "Get some rest," she murmured. "Tomorrow, we'll figure out our next move." Aurora's scales dimmed to peaceful blues, but their mental link remained active, wrapping them both in a sense of absolute trust. They had found in each other something neither species had expected, proof that being different wasn't a flaw, but a gift that could bridge the gap between worlds. The Lumini ship appeared like a tear in reality, a crystalline structure that bent starlight around its edges. Sarah watched it descend through the cabin's frost-covered window, her heart pounding. Aurora's scales flickered with complex emotions, joy at seeing its people, fear of their judgment, and a desperate need to protect Sarah. "It's okay," she whispered, though her own hands trembled. "We knew they'd come eventually." The ship landed in the mountain meadow with impossible grace, hovering just above the snow-covered ground. Its surface rippled like liquid glass, reflecting the dawn in fractal patterns. Through their mental link, Aurora shared information rapidly. This was a scout vessel, smaller than the research ship it had been separated from, designed for discrete contact situations. The cabin door burst open as Sarah reached for it, letting in a blast of winter air and 3 tall, crystalline figures. Adult Lumini were nothing like Aurora. Their forms were angular, their colors muted and controlled. All emotion was carefully regulated, visible only in the faintest shifts of hue beneath their translucent surface. "Step away from the juvenile," the tallest one commanded in perfect English, its words accompanied by pulses of light that Sarah felt in her mind. The other 2 moved to flank it, their forms rippling with barely contained energy. Aurora's response was immediate and fierce. Its scales blazed with protective colors as it pressed against its chamber wall, projecting images and emotions so strongly that all 3 adult Lumini took a step back. Sarah felt the exchange through their link, Aurora showing them everything. The crash, Sarah's rescue, the military pursuit, the deep bond they'd formed. The lead Lumini's surface flickered with disbelief. "Impossible," it said. "Humans are incapable of such emotional resonance. They are primitive, driven by base instincts, and—" "You're wrong," Sarah interrupted, stepping forward. "You've been wrong about us all along. Let me show you." Before they could react, she pressed her hand against the nearest Lumini surface. The contact sent a shock through her system. Their mental abilities were far stronger than Aurora's. But Sarah didn't resist. Instead, she opened her mind completely, sharing everything. They saw her life's dedication to healing, felt her deep empathy for all living things. They experienced her first sight of Aurora, the instant decision to help despite her fear. They felt the depth of her love for the alien child, unconditional, protective, expecting nothing in return. Most importantly, they felt her hope for what humans and Lumini could learn from each other. The adult Lumini's colors shifted dramatically, their careful control cracking under the weight of what they were experiencing. They had never encountered emotions this complex, this pure, from any species they'd studied. "The juvenile was right," the lead Lumini said finally, its voice softer. "We have gravely misunderstood humanity." Aurora's scales danced with joy as it shared more memories, Sarah teaching it about human music, about the beauty of imperfection, about the strength found in embracing rather than suppressing emotion. The adult Lumini absorbed these lessons with growing wonder, their own colors becoming gradually more expressive. "We came to retrieve our lost child," the lead Lumini said, "but we have found something far more valuable, proof that our isolation has cost us dearly. Perhaps it is time for that to change." The other Lumini rippled in agreement, their surfaces now showing colors as bright as Aurora's. Through their expanded mental link, Sarah felt their worldview shifting, centuries of prejudice giving way to new understanding. Aurora pressed its tendrils against the chamber wall, projecting an image that took Sarah's breath away. A future where humans and Lumini worked together, each species learning from the other's strengths. The adult Lumini absorbed this vision, their colors shifting to match Aurora's hopeful hues. "Sarah Chen," the lead Lumini said, extending a crystalline limb toward her. "We would like to make you an offer." The Lumini homeworld's twin suns painted the crystalline spires in sheets of rose and gold. Sarah stood on a balcony made of living crystal, watching aurora-like colors ripple through the city's structures. After 6 months, the sight still took her breath away. "Still adjusting?" asked Dr. Carell, their scaled surface shimmering with gentle amusement. Like many younger Lumini, they had adopted a personal name since first contact, inspired by Aurora's stories of human customs. "Every day," Sarah replied, touching the environmental suit's control panel at her neck. The xenon-rich atmosphere that sustained the Lumini would be lethal to her without protection, but the suit had become like a second skin, though not nearly as much as your people are adjusting to emotions. Below them, in what had once been a sterile research facility, a group of young Lumini played with earth dogs, specially bred for life in environmental suits. Sarah smiled as she watched them, their scales flashing with unrestrained joy as the dogs romped and played. 6 months ago, such a display would have been considered shamefully primitive. Aurora emerged from the building, its colors bright and confident. No longer the lost child Sarah had found in her pond, it had grown into its role as a bridge between worlds. The dogs rushed to greet it, and Aurora's scales danced with delight as it joined their play. "We had forgotten," Corell admitted, their surface showing the deeper purples of contemplation. "In our pursuit of perfect order, we lost something essential. Your species reminded us that emotion isn't a weakness to be controlled, but a strength to be embraced." Through the expanded mental link they all now shared, Sarah felt the truth of those words. The Lumini were changing, learning to balance their logical nature with emotional depth. And humans, through ambassadors like herself, were learning the value of the Lumini's thoughtful restraint. "Ambassador Chen," a voice called from inside. Another Lumini emerged, one of the three who had first found them in her cabin. "The human medical delegation is arriving. They're eager to begin learning about our resonant healing techniques." Sarah nodded, but before she could move, Aurora broke away from the dogs and rushed to her side. Its tendrils wrapped gently around her suited wrist, sharing images of their first days together. The memory of trust freely given, of bonds forged through compassion rather than duty. "I know," she smiled, feeling Aurora's surge of affection. "I never forget." The medical delegation turned out to be larger than expected. Doctors, veterinarians, and researchers from every continent, all wearing environmental suits and trying not to gape at the crystalline architecture. Sarah stepped forward to greet them, Aurora at her side. "Welcome to the Lumini Healing Academy," she said, watching their faces light up with wonder as Aurora demonstrated a simple resonant healing technique, its scales painting the air with living light. "You're about to learn that medicine isn't just about biology or chemistry. Sometimes, the most powerful healing comes from connection." Through their mental link, Aurora shared its pride in how far they'd come. That first terrified contact in Sarah's clinic had grown into something revolutionary. Two species learning that their greatest differences could become their greatest strengths. As Sarah led the delegation inside, she caught glimpses of the future through Aurora's more developed senses, human children and young Lumini learning together, sharing thoughts and feelings across the species barrier. Hospitals where resonant healing complemented traditional medicine. Space vessels with joint crews, exploring the galaxy with both human intuition and Lumini precision. The twin suns began to set, turning the crystal city into a symphony of color. Sarah paused at the threshold of the academy, Aurora's tendrils still wrapped contentedly around her wrist. Together, they had proven that love could bridge any distance, even the vast gulf between stars. "Ready for another day of changing the universe?" she asked. Aurora's scales shifted through every color of joy as they stepped forward into their shared future, two hearts beating in perfect resonance across the boundaries of space, species, and understanding.